I woke up before dawn, like I always did. The house was quiet, too quiet. I turned over, half expecting to feel Lorraine beside me, but all I got was cold sheets. She hadn't been sleeping next to me for weeks. At first, she made excuses: too warm, too restless, needed space. But now, she didn't even bother explaining. I sat up, rubbing my face, staring at the empty side of the bed. My wedding ring felt heavier than usual, as if my body already knew something my mind refused to accept. Downstairs, I made coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, wrapping around me like an old memory. Lorraine used to love waking up to fresh coffee. Now, she barely touched it. I heard the shuffle of feet behind me. For a brief moment, my heart lifted. Maybe today would be different. Maybe she'd say good morning. Maybe she'd smile. Morning, I said. Nothing. She walked past me like I was furniture. I watched her open the fridge, grab a bottle of water, and check her phone. Her fingers moved fast, scrolling, typing, fully engaged with someone, just not me. I waited. Just one glance, one word. Nothing. Lorraine. I tried again. She sighed. I have to get ready. That was it. No eye contact. No warmth. No kiss on the cheek like she used to do without thinking. I let out a slow breath. It was like I had become a ghost in my own home. And the worst part? I had no idea why. I replayed the past few months in my head, searching for the moment things shifted. But there wasn't one. No big fight. No dramatic moment. Just distance. And I had no idea how to close it. That night, I lay in bed alone again, staring at the ceiling. The weight on my chest grew heavier. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What if this is the end?" I used to believe that love had a sound. The warmth in Lorraine's voice when she'd say my name, the soft laughter we used to share over inside jokes no one else would understand, the way she used to hum along to the radio while cooking dinner. Now, love had become silence. I woke up to the faint sound of the shower running. She was up before me. That never used to happen. Lorraine loved staying in bed for a few extra minutes, wrapped in the blankets, complaining about how she didn't want to start the day. I used to bring her coffee in bed, just to hear her groggy, "Thank you, babe." But now, I wasn't even a thought in her morning routine. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bathroom door. It was cracked open just enough for steam to curl out into the bedroom, fogging the mirror across from me. I could barely make out my own reflection, but I felt like a ghost anyway. When she finally came out, she didn't even glance at me. She wrapped her towel tighter around herself and walked straight to the closet. "Morning," I said, my voice careful, testing the waters. She barely muttered something back, maybe a morning, maybe just an annoyed sigh. I should have let it go. I should have accepted that this was just how things were now. But I couldn't. I followed her into the closet. "Lorraine, talk to me." She exhaled sharply and grabbed a blouse from the hanger. "I don't have time for this." Time for what? A conversation? A single moment of acknowledgement? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I don't know what's happening between us. Can we please just... She turned around so fast I almost stumbled back. "Wendell," I said, "I don't have time. I have a meeting in an hour." I studied her face, searching for anything: regret, guilt, even anger. But she just looked annoyed, like I was some kind of inconvenience. I swallowed hard. "Do you even care?" That was the moment I saw it. The flicker of something in her eyes, hesitation. But instead of answering, she turned back to the mirror and started buttoning her blouse. I felt a deep, twisting pain in my stomach. I wasn't imagining this. It wasn't in my head. Lorraine had checked out of our marriage, and I was the only one left trying to keep it together. That night, she came home late. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, but not really reading anything. My dinner sat untouched in front of me. I had made 2 plates. Hers was still covered in foil, untouched. I heard the front door open and close. Then, the unmistakable sound of her heels clicking against the floor. She walked in, glanced at me, and then at the plate. "You didn't have to wait." That's all she said. Not "sorry I'm late." Not "work was rough today." Just that. I clenched my jaw. "You could have texted." She sighed as she dropped her bag on the counter. "I was busy." I stared at her, something burning inside me. "You're always busy lately." She rolled her eyes. "Wendell, please, not tonight. Not tonight. Not ever." I watched as she took off her shoes, rubbing her temples like I was exhausting her just by existing. And that's when it hit me. She didn't just not love me anymore. She resented me. I stood up, chair scraping against the floor. My heart was hammering in my chest. but my mind was completely still. I left my untouched plate on the table and walked out of the kitchen. That was the night I realized something was deeply, painfully wrong. And for the first time, I started wondering, was there someone else? The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Lorraine in the bathroom again, the same routine. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment before rolling onto my side, glancing at the empty space beside me. The sheets on her side of the bed were barely wrinkled. She hadn't really slept. I sat up, rubbing my hands over my face. I had barely slept either. My mind kept replaying our conversation from last night, if you could even call it a conversation. The realization had settled in like a weight pressing against my ribs. Lorraine wasn't just ignoring me. She was pulling away, slowly and deliberately. The bathroom door opened, and she stepped out, towel wrapped around her, hair damp. She saw me sitting on the bed but didn't acknowledge me, walking straight to the closet again. I watched her, waiting, hoping she would say something, anything. She didn't. Instead, she moved with mechanical precision, pulling out clothes, slipping into them like I wasn't even there. I had never felt more invisible in my own home. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. "Lorraine," I said carefully, voice steady. She didn't look at me. "I have a lot to do today." I exhaled through my nose, biting back the frustration. "Do you even hear yourself? You always have a lot to do. When did that become an excuse to completely shut me out?" She finally turned, hands on her hips. "Wendell, I don't have time for this." There it was again. I don't have time. I let out a bitter laugh. "Right. No time for your husband. No time for our marriage. But you've got time for—" I hesitated, my own words choking me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "For what?" I could feel it hanging in the air between us. "For someone else?" I wanted to say it. I wanted to ask. But I wasn't ready for the answer. So instead, I shook my head and muttered, "Forget it." She turned back around, finishing getting dressed, and just like that, the conversation was over. That afternoon, I left work early. I didn't even know why. I just felt this restless energy inside me, like something was pulling me toward the truth whether I was ready for it or not. Lorraine's car wasn't in the driveway when I got home. I wasn't surprised. She had been coming home later and later, always with the same excuse: meetings, work, deadlines. I walked into the house, dropping my keys onto the table, and for the first time, I really looked around. The house was eerily neat. Almost staged. There were no traces of us anymore. The photos on the wall were the same, but they felt like relics from another life. The kitchen counter, once cluttered with our daily chaos, was spotless. No signs of her morning coffee mug. No traces of the hurried breakfast we used to share. It was like Lorraine had already checked out. I went upstairs, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. My stomach twisted as I glanced at the neatly made bed, at the vanity where her perfumes used to sit, now reduced to just one bottle, the rest missing. I felt my pulse quicken. I went to the closet. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. But then, as I looked closer, I realized there were gaps. Lorraine's side wasn't empty, but it was lighter. The hangers weren't as full as they used to be. Some of her favorite dresses were gone. A few pairs of shoes missing. I crouched down and pulled open the bottom drawer, where she kept her smaller travel bags. Empty. My breath came out slow and controlled, but inside, my heart was hammering. She was leaving. Or worse, she had already left in every way that mattered. I stood there for a long time, gripping the edge of the drawer, staring at the empty space where her things should be. The truth was sinking in, slow and suffocating. I wasn't just losing my wife. She was disappearing right in front of me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the open closet, my mind tangled in a mess of unanswered questions. The missing clothes, the empty travel bag, it was all there in plain sight, but I still couldn't wrap my head around it. How long had she been planning this? How long had I been sleeping beside someone who had already decided to walk away? A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't noticed the gaps in her wardrobe, the way our house had started feeling like a waiting room instead of a home. But another part of me, the one that had been screaming at me for weeks, refused to let it go. I stood up, jaw tight, and started searching. Not in a frantic, panicked way, but methodically. I checked the drawers, her nightstand, the bathroom cabinets. My hand shook slightly as I pulled them open, one by one, scanning for something, anything that would tell me what was going on. And then, in the top drawer of her dresser, I found it. A small envelope, tucked away beneath a pile of folded scarves. My name was written on the front. My stomach clenched. I pulled it out slowly, my fingers numb, and sat back down on the bed. The envelope wasn't sealed. I hesitated, taking a deep breath before pulling out the folded piece of paper inside. It wasn't long. It wasn't an explanation. It was just a few lines, written in Lorraine's neat, almost clinical handwriting. Wendell, I don't know how to say this, so I won't try. I need space. Please don't make this harder than it already is. L. I read it 3 times, waiting for some hidden meaning to reveal itself, but there was nothing. No emotion. No regret. Just a cold, impersonal request for me to disappear from her life quietly. Something inside me cracked. Space? She needed space? I had given her nothing but space. For weeks, I had been patient. I had tried to understand. I had given her room to breathe, to work through whatever was going on in her head. And now she was telling me to just let her go, like our marriage was a bad investment she was cutting her losses on. I stood up, the letter still clenched in my fist, and walked out of the bedroom. I needed air. I drove aimlessly for a while, my thoughts a chaotic blur. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart from a distance. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small diner Lorraine and I used to visit when we were first married. I had no idea why I ended up there, but I got out anyway, stepping inside. The place looked exactly the same, dim lighting, cracked leather booths, the smell of coffee and fried food hanging in the air. I slid into a booth near the window, ordering a black coffee from the waitress without even thinking about it. My hands were still shaking slightly as I placed Lorraine's note on the table in front of me, smoothing it out. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe I should have been angry. Maybe I should have been heartbroken. But more than anything, I just felt tired. Tired of trying. Tired of waiting for an explanation that wasn't coming. Tired of fighting for someone who had already left. Rough night? The voice came from across the table. I looked up, startled, to see a woman standing there, holding a coffee cup in one hand. She was about my age, with dark hair pulled into a loose bun, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. I frowned slightly. Do I know you? She gave me a small, apologetic smile. Sorry, that was probably weird. I noticed you've been staring at that piece of paper for 10 minutes like it's going to change if you look at it long enough. I let out a slow breath, glancing back down at Lorraine's note. Yeah, something like that. She hesitated, then gestured toward the empty seat across from me. Mind if I sit? For a second, I almost said no. I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone. But then, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in weeks, someone actually looked at me instead of through me. I nodded. Sure. She slid into the booth, setting her coffee down. I'm Miriam, by the way. Wendell. She studied me for a moment, then nodded toward the paper. Want to talk about it? I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. She smiled slightly. Well, lucky for you. I'm a pretty good listener. And just like that, I found myself telling a complete stranger the story of how my wife had vanished from our marriage long before she ever wrote that note. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I don't know why I told her everything. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the way my body had been running on fumes for weeks. Maybe it was the fact that I had spent so long being ignored that when someone finally looked at me, really looked at me, I couldn't help but spill everything. Miriam just sat there, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, listening. She didn't interrupt. She didn't give me those pitying looks people give when they don't know what to say. She just let me talk. And I talked. I told her how Lorraine used to be my best friend. How, for years, we had been inseparable, finishing each other's thoughts, knowing each other's routines like second nature. I told her about the road trips, the lazy Sundays, the stupid little arguments over nothing that always ended in laughter. Then I told her about the silence, the distance, the nights spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling while the woman I loved slept a million miles away, even though she was right there. I showed her the note. Miriam read it, her expression unreadable. Then she placed it back on the table, tapping her nails lightly against the surface. So she just left you with this? Not officially, I muttered. She's still living in the house. Still going through the motions. But emotionally? She left a long time ago. Miriam leaned back in her seat, exhaling. I don't get people like that. I raised an eyebrow. People like what? People who don't have the guts to just say what they want, she said, shaking her head. If she wanted out, she should have just told you instead of making you live in some weird, slow-motion breakup. I blinked. That's exactly what it feels like. She nodded. Yeah, like she's leaving. But instead of packing a bag and walking out, she's doing it in tiny, excruciating steps. One missing dress at a time. one ignored conversation at a time. Like she wants to make you disappear from her life before she disappears from yours. Her words hit me harder than I expected. That's exactly what Lorraine had been doing. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Miriam sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. I've seen it before. People don't always leave in a single moment. Sometimes, they leave piece by piece until there's nothing left of them in your world. And when they're finally gone, you look around and realize they took you with them. I swallowed hard. What are you, a therapist or something? She smirked. Nah, just someone who's been there. I studied her face, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before, the tiredness in her eyes, the way she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, like she was somewhere else in her head. She had lived through this. What happened? I asked before I could stop myself. Miriam glanced at me, then down at her cup. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then she sighed. My ex-husband, she said simply. One day, he just stopped seeing me. Kind of like what you're going through now. We still shared a house, still went through the motions. But I could feel it. I could feel that he had already left. He just hadn't figured out how to say it yet. I frowned. How did you know for sure? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. He started living like I wasn't there. Coming home late without an excuse. Making plans without asking me. At some point, he stopped saying goodnight. That was the one that got me. You don't think about it. But when you've been with someone for years and they stop saying goodnight, it's like a little death every time. I exhaled, nodding. Yeah. Silence settled between us. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that comes when two people just understand each other. Finally, Miriam tilted her head. So, what are you going to do now? I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't know. I don't want to be the guy who fights for someone who's already checked out. But I also don't want to just roll over and let my marriage end without a fight. Miriam studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. Wendell, let me ask you something. I looked at her. What? If Lorraine walked out right now, officially, for real, how much of yourself would she take with her? The question sat heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to answer, but for the first time, I wasn't sure what to say. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. She had already taken too much. I drove home that night feeling like I had left something behind in that diner, like a part of me had been pried loose and left sitting in that booth across from Miriam. Maybe it was the truth she had forced me to look at. Maybe it was the weight of my own denial finally crumbling under its own pressure. Either way, I felt lighter. And at the same time, heavier. When I pulled into the driveway, Lorraine's car was already parked in its usual spot. The porch light was on, casting long shadows across the yard. For the first time in weeks, I hesitated before walking inside. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. A confrontation? An argument? Some kind of confession? But when I stepped through the front door, the house was as silent as ever. I heard movement upstairs, the faint rustle of fabric, the sound of drawers opening and closing. I set my keys down on the table and made my way up, my heartbeat slow and steady, my thoughts tangled. When I reached the bedroom, Lorraine was standing by the dresser, folding clothes into a suitcase. I stopped in the doorway, the sight of it hitting me harder than I thought it would. She didn't hear me at first. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. She was focused, her movements precise, methodical. Like this wasn't some last-minute decision. Like she had been planning this for a long time. I exhaled. So this is it? She froze for a moment, fingers gripping the fabric in her hands. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. Her face was unreadable. No sadness. No regret. Just that same distant look I had grown used to. I was going to tell you, she said. I huffed out a bitter laugh. When? After you were already gone? She didn't answer. I took a step into the room, my voice calm but firm. How long have you been planning this? She swallowed, glancing down at the suitcase. A while. I felt something twist in my chest. And you didn't think I deserved to know? She let out a breath. Wendell, I didn't want a big fight. I didn't want to drag this out. I stared at her, the weight of those words settling over me. Drag this out. Like our marriage was just an inconvenience she was trying to get rid of as quickly as possible. I clenched my jaw. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? Her eyes flickered, just for a second. But it was enough. She hesitated. And that was all I needed to see. I let out a slow breath, nodding. Right. That's what I thought. She looked away, pressing her lips together. I stepped past her, running a hand through my hair. My head was pounding. I had spent weeks, months, wondering what had gone wrong, searching for the moment I had lost her. But now, standing in our bedroom, watching her pack a suitcase like I was just another phase in her life, she was ready to leave behind, I realized something. I hadn't lost her. She had let go of me a long time ago, and I had been too blind to see it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had. Then, finally, Lorraine sighed. Wendell, I held up a hand, cutting her off. Don't, I said quietly. Whatever you're about to say, don't. She closed her mouth, her expression unreadable. I turned away, gripping the edge of the dresser, staring down at the wood grain beneath my fingers. There was nothing left to fight for, nothing left to save. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. I took a deep breath and exhaled. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. And this time, I didn't look back. I sat in my car long after I had left the house. The engine was off. The only sound was the faint hum of crickets outside, and yet my head was filled with noise. Memories, echoes of conversations that no longer meant anything, questions that had no answers. I should have felt something. Anger, relief, heartbreak. But instead, I just felt hollow. I gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. I had spent so much time trying to understand what was happening between Lorraine and me, trying to fix something that had been broken long before I even realized it. And now that she was finally gone, now that she had made her choice, I was left sitting in the wreckage with nothing but silence. Was this what she wanted? To erase me so cleanly from her life that I would just sit here, stunned, while she walked away without a second thought. A part of me wanted to drive back, to demand answers, to force her to see me one last time before she disappeared for good. But I knew better. Some people don't leave you with a dramatic exit. They just stop being yours long before they ever walk out the door. And Lorraine? She had been gone for a long time. I let out a slow breath and pulled my phone out of my pocket, staring at the screen. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing from her. Of course, there wasn't. I clicked on our old messages, scrolling up. Most of them were months old. Casual conversations, reminders about groceries, the occasional love you from before things started falling apart. Then I saw it. The last time she had texted me first. 3 months ago. Hey, I might be home late. Don't wait up. That was it. That was the last time she had made an effort, even in the smallest way. I let out a bitter laugh and turned off my phone. She had been giving me clues this whole time, hadn't she? I just refused to see them. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. If she wanted to go, I wasn't going to chase her. But that didn't mean I was going to sit here and drown in the empty spaces she left behind, either. I put the key in the ignition, started the car, and pulled out of the driveway. But I didn't drive home, because home wasn't a place anymore. It was just a reminder of everything I had already lost. I found myself at the same diner from before. The neon sign buzzed softly, casting a glow against the pavement. Through the window, I could see a few late-night stragglers, an older man reading a newspaper, a couple sharing a milkshake, a waitress wiping down the counter. And then, in the corner booth, Miriam. She was staring out the window, her chin resting in her hand, her expression distant. I wasn't sure why I had come here. Maybe because she had been the first person in a long time to actually see me. Maybe because I wasn't ready to go back to an empty house just yet. Or maybe because, for the first time since all of this started, I didn't want to be alone. I stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled. Miriam looked up. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, she just watched me. Then she smiled small, knowing, like she understood exactly why I was there without me having to say a word. And just like that, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. I walked toward her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. Miriam didn't say anything as I slid into the booth across from her. She just raised an eyebrow, like she had been expecting me. I let out a breath, running a hand over my face. Is it weird that I ended up here? She smirked. Not really. The waitress came by, setting a coffee cup in front of me without even asking. Maybe she recognized me from the other night. Maybe I just looked like the kind of man who needed coffee. Either way, I murmured a thanks and wrapped my hands around the warmth of the mug. Miriam watched me for a moment before tilting her head. So, is it over? I nodded slowly. Yeah. She didn't look surprised. And how do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought about it. When I walked out of that house, I expected to feel something big, anger, devastation, maybe even relief. But now, sitting in this booth, drinking coffee across from someone who had been a complete stranger only a few days ago, all I felt was free. Not empty. Not broken. Just free. I feel like I can breathe again, I admitted. Miriam's smirk softened into something more thoughtful. That's a good sign. I nodded. I think so too. She took a sip of her coffee, watching me over the rim of her cup. So, what now? That was the real question, wasn't it? For so long, my life had revolved around Lorraine, around fixing something that didn't want to be fixed. And now that it was over, now that she was gone, I actually had to think about myself for once. The thought wasn't terrifying. It was exciting. I exhaled. I don't know. But for the first time, I'm actually looking forward to figuring it out. Miriam grinned. Now that is the right answer. We sat there for a while, just talking. Not about Lorraine, not about failed marriages, not about heartbreak, just about life. Movies we liked. Places we had always wanted to visit. The dumbest thing we had ever done in high school. And for the first time in months, I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that didn't feel forced or hollow. The kind that reminded me I was still alive. At some point, I realized I wasn't thinking about Lorraine anymore. I wasn't replaying old conversations in my head, searching for where things had gone wrong. I wasn't wondering if I should have fought harder, or if I had missed some final chance to fix things. I was here, in the present, and it felt good. When the waitress came back to refill our coffee, Miriam glanced at me and smirked. So, you ever been to that little bookstore down the street? I frowned. No. Why? She shrugged. They've got this whole section of weird, useless trivia books. I bet you'd like them. I raised an eyebrow. Are you calling me weird and useless? She laughed. You're catching on fast. I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. Fine. Let's go check it out. We finished our coffee, left a few bills on the table, and stepped out into the cool night air. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was walking forward. And maybe, just maybe, the best part of my story was still ahead of me.